Welcome to HP Device Manager 5.0 demo. As a disclaimer, this demo makes the following assumptions: that Windows Server is set up, configured, and introduced into your environment, and that HP Device Manager 5.0 is configured and running, and finally, that compatible HP thin clients are present and running. Notice this video has been edited, and actual deployment times may vary. To begin, we're going to look at the HPDM 5.0 interface. The interface has been revamped with a brand new modern look and feel. Let's take a look. I've already installed HP Device Manager 5.0 in our lab environment, and I'm going to go ahead and launch it via the shortcut on the desktop. Once launched, I'm going to log in with our demonstration local account. And then once logged in, I'm going to go ahead and get greeted with the familiar splash screen as well as a loading bar as HP Device Manager 5.0 loads up. It will go ahead and drop us at the home dashboard once loaded up, as signified by the top left-hand corner house icon. You will also notice in this interface that there are 6 individual tabs or menus along the top. Those menus or tabs along the top correlate with the 6 individual boxes or tiles within the main view. Looking at each individual tile, you will notice a prime feature as well as secondary features as well as a status. The item in dark blue is a prime feature of that tile, and the items in simply blue are secondary features. And then, of course, at the bottom of most tiles, you will notice a status. All tiles will have a status with the exception of administration. Taking a look at managed devices, you have discover devices as a primary feature, add a device, import a device, and device filter is secondary. And then for the status in our particular demonstration, you'll notice that we have 6 connected, 0 offline, and 0 broken. Now let's take a look at the top right-hand corner where we have 3 icons. We have the profile icon, we have the detach icon, and then also the help icon. Within the user profile icon, you'll notice 3 choices. There is the revert default layout, which will revert the currently customized layout. There is the change password that will allow you to change the password for the currently logged in user, which in this case is demonstration. And then there's also a refresh all with the shortcut Control plus F5, which will allow you to refresh the currently viewed pane if it gets stuck. As far as the detach, this will allow you to detach any tab along the top and then move it over to a secondary monitor. And then finally, the question mark will have 4 items, which is documentation, software updates, console logs, as well as about. So let's take a look at customizing our user interface in specific for demonstration. If I'm looking at the tabs, I can actually click on one and then drag it and drop it wherever I see fit, and it will save it per the profile of this demonstration account. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click Manage Devices and drag that along the top. You're going to notice a black bar that floats along with it. This bar will signify where it's going to drop that tab. So for instance, I'm going to drop Manage Devices in the middle. And now you'll notice that Manage Devices moved from the front to the middle. I could also re-pick it up and then drag and drop it at the end. And in this way, I can shuffle around just about any tab that I want, and it will save it per the existing logged in profile. Referring to the detach option, I can also leave it highlighted on Manage Devices tab and then click the detach. It will then detach the Manage Devices tab into its own respective window, which I can then drag over to a secondary display if I see fit. I can also return the Manage Devices tab back where it was by dragging it back up along the top and waiting for that black bar to show up and then simply dropping it. If I had also detached it and wanted to just simply revert to default layout, I could have also in fact clicked on the profile icon and then chosen to revert default layout, which would have put Manage Devices back into default layout. I can also do such things as pull the tab away from the main tabbed view, and you will notice a box that follows along with me, an outlined box. If I go ahead and drag it to the left, it will show the box to the left. If I drag it to the right, it will show the box to the right. And then of course, towards the top, and then also towards the bottom for that box. So let's go ahead and drop it towards the bottom. And you will notice that it has in fact taken the Manage Devices tab away and carved up the existing real estate. And I can then turn around and adjust it how I see fit. And I can get as creative as I want to. I can also maybe grab administration, pull that away, and also carve up the real estate further, maybe drag it towards the left. And now I have a tri view. And then of course I can adjust that view accordingly as well. So now I have 3 respective views, and I can also revert back to default layout simply by clicking on the profile icon and then choosing revert to default layout, in which case everything will snap back to default and back to normal. So now let's talk about the 3 scenarios for this demonstration. For scenario 1, we're going to talk about Citrix receiver dynamic property and update. For scenario 2, we're going to talk about time and USB scripted dynamic properties and header customization. And then finally, for scenario 3, we're going to talk about easy shell dynamic property rules and update. We'll start with scenario 1. That will consist of deploying the Citrix receiver dynamic property and observing the effect on the dynamic group. And then we will deploy the Citrix receiver update and observe the effect on the dynamic group. Let's begin. I have already installed Server 2016 Standard, and I've already installed HP Device Manager 5.0 Service Pack 1. I'll go ahead and click on the shortcut for HP Device Manager on my desktop. I will then log in with my user account. Once we get past the splash screen, we should arrive at the home dashboard. And I'll go ahead and click on Manage Devices for this first scenario. We have already pre-set up some existing settings. We've pre-selected Windows 10 IoT 64-bit for the OS of choice. And we've already pre-populated an existing demonstration group with the templates we are going to be utilizing. We have also pre-selected a group for Citrix receiver that is tied to the dynamic property of Citrix receiver. So in effect, this dynamic property here. We have also pre-selected a filter by demo, which is tied to an existing thin client sitting in this unknown folder of sales, and that is indeed a T520. I will go ahead and grab the dynamic property for Citrix and drop it on our sales thin client. Then I'll review that it is in fact applying the Citrix receiver inside dynamic property, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Up at the top, we will observe tasks and reports will show a number 1 in orange. If I click on it, I will be able to tell that the managed dynamic properties for the Citrix receiver inside is deploying, and it is currently in a status of processing. And we will allow that to finish before we return back to the managed devices to observe that the dynamic property has taken effect and that it has also updated our grouping. The managed dynamic property of Citrix receiver insight has now taken effect, and you will notice that it is now green for finished. We will now go ahead and click on manage devices and check on our dynamic group, and you will notice here that Citrix receiver insight is now pulling a Citrix receiver version of 4.7.0.65534. You can further verify by right-clicking the thin client and choosing properties, and then clicking on the dynamic properties submenu, and you will notice here the dynamic property of Citrix receiver inside pulling the property value exhibited behind in this group. I'll go ahead and click OK. And now what we will go ahead and do is deploy a Citrix receiver update, and we will utilize this template right here. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag it over to our thin client and drop it. Just to review, this template will include the following. It will be deploying the files to the C:\temp directory, and it will be Citrix receiver version 4.12. The script will consist of the following. And after the install is complete, it will clean up by deleting the contents in the C:\temp folder. Once that template is sent, you will notice once again, tasks and reports will light up with an orange number 1. If we click on tasks and reports, you will notice once again, we are in the deploying process, and it is light blue for processing. and we will wait and allow that to complete before we check on our dynamic group and confirm that it is in fact updated and reflected in our grouping. Now that the Citrix receiver update has finished, it is now green as reflected down here in the legend for finished. I will now click back on Manage Devices and review our dynamic group. As you can see here, it is now updated to 4.12.0.65534. So our Citrix receiver update has completed. This concludes Scenario 1 demonstration. For Scenario 2, we will be deploying the time dynamic property to monitor time, customizing the header, and then observing the time monitoring. We will also be deploying the USB dynamic property to monitor flash drive, customizing the header, and observing the flash drive monitoring. Let's begin. We will continue where we left off on the Manage Devices tab. For this scenario, we will be switching our group back to the default dynamic group, and that will consist of our HPDM gateway folder. We will now be deploying 2 dynamic property templates. The first dynamic property template will consist of the USB monitoring, and I will go ahead and click and drag that onto our thin client. As you can see here, it is a multi-step advanced template. If we look at the file and registry sequence in this template, by double-clicking, you will see a deploy files subtask. If I double-click on that, you will notice that there is a PowerShell deploying to C:\Windows/XPE agent/USB to the local thin client. For the Manage Dynamic Properties and Sequence template, if we double-click on that, you will notice that it is applying the following USB info dynamic property. And if we click on the pencil to review, you will notice that it is set to a check interval of 1 minute. It is a customized script. We've given it a property name of USB info, and this is the script that will be utilized. You will notice once again that on Tasks and Reports, an orange number 1 has lit up. If I click on Tasks and Reports, you will notice that the USB info dynamic property is now being deployed out, and it is in processing status. We will allow that to complete. Now that the USB dynamic property is complete, and it is now green for finished, I'll go ahead and click back on the Manage Devices tab. And I will go ahead and right-click in the header of our thin client pane, and then choose More. On the left available column pane, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and select the USB info dynamic property and click the right arrow to move it over into our visible columns. And you will see that reflected here at the bottom of the visible columns, and click OK. If I grab the scroll bar at the bottom of the pane and scroll to the right, you will notice the USB info header. Before we test that USB monitoring, I'm going to go ahead and deploy our secondary dynamic property, which will be the system time. And I will go ahead and click and drag the system time dynamic property over to our thin client. As part of this template, if I click on system time and click the pencil for edit, you will see that it is set for an interval of 1 minute, just like the USB info. It is also a customized script, and we've given it a property name of system time, and we are utilizing the following script. You will notice up at the top that Tasks and Reports is once again lit up with an orange number 1. If we click on it, you will see that the dynamic property for the system time is now deploying out. It is blue for processing, and we'll wait for that to complete. Now that the dynamic property for system time has completed, it is green, and you will note that it is finished as before. I will go ahead and click on Manage Devices, and go back to our header, right-click it, and choose More. On the left column for available columns, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to our system time dynamic property, and I'm going to click the right arrow to move it over to the visible columns, and then I can scroll down to verify that it is also beneath the USB info and hit OK. If I grab the scroll bar and scroll all the way to the right, you will now notice that we are now monitoring the system time of the thin client, and it is in fact synced up with our server as well. And now what I'm going to go ahead and do so that we can test out the USB info, I'm going to connect in a flash drive, and we should see the USB info populate with the connected flash drive. As you can see, the USB flash drive has updated with the vendor and identified that a USB flash drive is in fact connected. This completes scenario 2. For scenario 3, we will be enabling the Easy Shell dynamic property rule, and then we will enable the Easy Shell update rule. Then we will delete the thin client, rediscover the thin client, and then observe the Easy Shell dynamic property rule deployment, and also observe the Easy Shell update rule deployment. Let's begin. For scenario 3 demonstration, we will continue where we left off. I will start by selecting the group of Easy Shell. This Easy Shell group is controlled by the dynamic property of Easy Shell. And then I will go ahead and click on Templates and Rules tab. You'll notice under Templates and Rules, and also under the submenu of rules, that I have 2 rules created existing. The first rule will set the dynamic property for Easy Shell, and the secondary rule will update Easy Shell. If I double click on the Create Dynamic Property Easy Shell, you will notice the rule name of Create Dynamic Property Easy Shell as well. For target, you will notice that it is targeting Win 10 IoT 64-bit and all devices regardless of folder. Since we only have one device, that will be targeting the single sales thin client. For constraints, you'll notice that it is pointed to the IP address of that single sales thin client. For the when, you'll notice that it's set to on first contact, which means that when that thin client is discovered after deletion for the first time, that this rule will be executed. For the action, you'll notice down here a template. And if I go ahead and create edit or click edit, you'll notice the dynamic property of Easy Shell being applied. For task parameters, you will notice the standard parameters for default. And for summary, a nice summary of the rule. I can go ahead and click the check marks, or I can go ahead and click the check mark for enable, and then finish. And you'll notice that it is also check marked here for enable. In the same way, I can double click update Easy Shell, and you will notice the rule name of update Easy Shell. For the target, it will be the same target of Win 10 IoT 64-bit and the same all devices regardless of folder. For constraint, it will also be the same IP address. And for when, it will be the same on first contact. For action, if I look at the template and hit edit, you notice there are 3 subtasks to the template. There is the deploy files, which will deploy Easy Shell 03.06.022 to C:\temp. It will then run the script as follows. And then it will delete the files from C:\temp. I can go ahead and click on task parameters to verify the same standard default task parameters, and then the summary to show the summary of the rule, and then click enable for the checkbox, and then finish. As part of this rule, it will want me to verify the description of it. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to x64, the OS type to Win 10 IoT 64-bit, and leave the rest at default and click generate. You will notice that there will be a check mark for enable for the secondary rule for Update Easy Shell. Now that we have both rules enabled, we will go ahead and click back on Manage Devices tab, find our Sales Thin Client, right-click, delete, yes to delete, and then rediscover. I'm going to discover using the IP range and hit next. The IP range will be previously set by me for my environment and hit OK. Tasks and reports will show an orange number 1. And if I click on tasks and reports and then gateway tasks where the orange number 1 has shown there as well, you will notice that discover device is in processing. Once this is complete, this will be a green check mark. Notice here that it is now complete with a green check mark, and that on device tasks, there's now an orange number 2. If I click on device tasks, you will notice those two rules, the update easy shell, which is currently in waiting, and the create dynamic property easy shell, which is currently in processing with light blue. Now that create dynamic property easy shell is now green, I'll go ahead and click on manage devices and confirm that it has taken effect on our dynamic group and that it is now version 3.4.16. I can further verify by right-clicking the thin client and then choosing properties and then the dynamic properties subgroup menu item. And you will notice that right here it is monitoring easy shell at 3.4.16. If I go ahead and click back on our tasks and reports, we'll notice that update easy shell is in fact now in light blue processing status. Once that is complete and green, we will go ahead and verify that it has successfully updated easy shell. Now that the update easy shell has completed, it is now green and it is in finished status. I'm going to go ahead and click back on manage devices tab. And you will notice here that it is now changed to 3.6.22. This completes scenario 3 demonstration. In summary, we demonstrated the following: Citrix receiver dynamic property and its update, time and USB scripted dynamic properties and header customization for monitoring, easy shell dynamic property rules and updating. I would like to invite you to our Tuesday and Thursday webinars. This concludes the HP Device Manager 5.0 demo. Thank you.